Hello, my fellow misfits. Welcome back to the cult. I'm Matt Owens. Today I want to talk about false flags, government PsyOps, and those mysterious drones that are zooming around New Jersey, New York, other places across the country, across the globe. That's why I have this background here. Let's just pretend that's New Jersey, guys. First, I want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out to South Africa, of all places. I recently just got an email letting me know that A Cult of Misfits, my podcast, is currently ranked 148th in the category of spirituality in South Africa. So real proud of that, guys. That's a real gold star for me. I've been trying to win over the South African populace for quite some time. So finally making some inroads in South Africa. And I'm real proud of myself for that. I think this is just proof. This is just proof that Elon and his family members have finally caught on. They're finally watching A Cult of Misfits. So shout out to Elon. Thank you for supporting the podcast, and I hope it continues to spread throughout the entire continent of Africa, guys. If you're interested, you can follow me. I got other content over on Instagram if you weren't aware, if you've been living in a hole, if you don't know anything about me or my life. I'm on Instagram, guys. You can follow me at Cult of Misfits. I'm on there on the reg, posting, fire memes and reels and stories and just all the things. So, have you ever taken just that perfect selfie where your hair is just on point and the lighting is just, golden? You're sporting that new shirt that you bought. Your skin is flawless. You're basically in full Kardashian mode. That's what I'm talking about here, guys. You ever taken one of those pictures? You post the selfie on Instagram. It's getting a ton of likes. You're feeling like $1,000,000. Now, imagine what would happen if you were to take that photograph, take it into Costco, print off about 75 or 100 copies of that photo on cardstock, and then mail it. Like, physically mail the photograph, get stamps. Are stamps even still a thing? I don't know, guys. Stamps, envelopes, the whole shebang. Physically mail this photograph to everybody you know. All of your friends, all of your family members, every business associate that you've ever come in contact with over the last 10 years, you're sending that photo out to everybody, right? It'd be complete madness. People would think you're insane. Like, who is this guy? This egomaniacal but yet this is what happens every single Christmas. People insist on sending out these Christmas cards with their photos on it. And I don't get it. I don't understand this whole tradition of sending out Christmas cards with your family's photos on it. Because there's always this pressure. There's this expectation that I'm supposed to display this thing, display this photograph, these onslaught of Christmas cards that people insist on sending me, put them up on the fridge or to hang them up on some prominent wall in my home, displaying them like I'm collecting Pokemon cards or something. I don't know. Like, oh, look, I got one from the Smiths. Ooh, that's a rare one. Ooh, I got one from the Wilsons. Ooh, they look nice, right? I have this friend who, she insists on sending me a card every year. This Christmas card, every year we go through the rigmarole. She asks me for my address so that she can send me a picture of her family. And every year I'm like, you know what? I'm good. No, thanks. I'm good. I know what your family looks like. Like, I follow you guys on Instagram. I don't need a photo of you guys staring back at me from my fridge every time I open it up for a glass of milk or something. I get what you guys look like. But she insists on sending me this card every single year. So I've got this little tradition where I take her Christmas card and I fold it up real nice and neat and I tuck it into my pocket. And then I go on a walk. I'm going to walk with Chi Chi, my sweet little dog. And whenever he decides to take a dump, I reach into my pocket, I unfold that Christmas card, and I scoop up the poop. It's my own little recycling program, guys. It's my way of saying Merry Christmas. I don't want the Christmas cards. It's like if you have a cat, if you have a pet cat and they bring you like the decapitated head of a mouse and leave it on your doorstep as like a little present. I don't need that. I didn't ask for a decapitated mouse head. In the same way, I didn't ask for a Christmas card. I don't need your Christmas cards. I don't need your decapitated heads. I don't want any of it. And, I used to be a professional photographer, and I used to take these Christmas card photos for families every year. It was quite lucrative, actually. And I have to tell you a little peek behind the curtain here that 9 times out of 10, these family photo shoots, they're like a hostage situation. Like the family arrives frazzled and stressed out, like the mom is barking orders. The kids are all almost in tears, on the verge of just losing it. The husband just sort of jams his hands into his pockets and is staring at the ground, just kind of avoiding eye contact with everybody, just trying to get through this, right? When the mom isn't looking, I'd kind of whisper to the kids, like, blink twice if you're brought here against your will. And they're all just like, blink, 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 blink. Nobody wants to be there. It's all very tense. It's all very chaotic. It's like this high stakes situation that has to be executed properly and perfectly. Otherwise, somebody's going to legit get executed, and I don't want it to be me. So I'm just there to get us all through this, shepherd us through this photo session. The kids are being promised like bowls of M&Ms for lunch if they'll just cooperate for 5 minutes and stop running around like maniacs. The husband's checking his watch every 5 minutes. Like, it's chaos. Nobody wants to be there. So anyway, guys, this is sort of my long-winded way of saying, just for the love of God, stop sending me Christmas cards, please. All right, guys, I feel like this is a good one. I've been meaning to talk about this for a while. I've been sort of diving deep into the whole drone situation in New Jersey. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about UAPs. UAPs are sort of this new-ish term, if you don't know, that stands for unidentified aerial phenomenon. It's kind of the military's and the government's way of saying UFO without sounding like a tinfoil hat nut job. So they call them UAPs. They're essentially UFOs. They have no idea what they are. They just want to say that, like, look, we don't know what these things are. We don't want to admit that they're aliens, but like, there's something flying around out there that we don't know what the hell's going on. So, these last few months, I've actually been doing some pretty deep dives into just the whole UFO community. I've been listening to just what everybody has to say. I've been listening to the ufologists, the tinfoil hat nut jobs. I've been listening to congressional leaders and military pilots and these high-ranking military officials and people that have access to these allegedly secret programs. I'm listening to what everybody has to say. As I do with everything, I like to just take all the puzzle pieces, hear what everybody's talking about, and then just sort of put it together the best that I can and come to some sort of conclusion. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today. UFOs and objects in the sky, of course, have been reported for thousands of years, since the beginning of time, antiquity itself. And in the Bible, Elijah gets taken up by a chariot of fire. These ancient tribes and the natives talk about flying crafts, and there's a hieroglyph in Egypt that depicts this thing that looks like a helicopter, real mysterious. And so there's kind of this long-standing tradition of these craft in the sky, and it would appear that they oftentimes will depict themselves or look like near futuristic craft, right? Something that's just beyond the technology that's currently understood by the civilization at the time. For example, in the 1800s, there were these sightings of these blimps and these airships that were appearing all over in America, and they were appearing before blimps and airships were actually invented. So it was something that humans at the time could kind of conceive, like this flying balloon thing. Wow, that looks kind of wacky. What is it? I don't understand it. And then in the 1950s and the 1960s, we started seeing, these things that are flying saucers that were, we had just sort of invented jet technology here on Earth. And so the idea of this flying saucer that was anti-gravity was kind of just beyond the scope of what we can kind of comprehend in terms of what is capable technologically. And nowadays it's sort of advanced. The saucers are still around, right? We still see the saucers occasionally, but now they're kind of being described as drones or these glowing orbs, right? So I wonder, there's this idea that they can sort of morph themselves into something that our human minds can comprehend, which sort of lends itself to the idea that this is something perhaps from another dimension, a higher dimension that we can't comprehend with our human minds. And as these objects or beings enter our dimension or our realm, that they sort of manifest themselves into these things that our human minds and human eyeballs can kind of comprehend, right? If you want to look it up, there's this really interesting case in the 1500s in Nuremberg, Germany, where there was allegedly this massive and epic aerial battle, right, between all of these mysterious airships and aircraft that were flying over Nuremberg, Germany. They were crescent shaped and cylindrical shaped and triangle shaped and spheres. It was all of the above, having this epic battle. So. I just find it interesting that we've been talking about this sort of thing since the beginning of time. And then, if you're anything like me, you've been following these congressional hearings, and these aren't the first congressional hearings about UAPs and UFOs, and congressional members looking into it and having panels and discussions about looking into what could possibly be happening. The most current congressional hearing, if you're not following it, the main point behind it and what's giving it its full force is that it's a safety issue, right? Because a lot of these pilots, the Air Force pilots and Navy pilots, are going out on training missions and going out for exercises and whatever. And they're seeing these craft in the sky that are UAPs, that are unidentified aerial phenomena. They have no idea what it is. They're not ours. We don't know what they are. And the safety issue comes that there's been a lot of near misses from these objects. There's been a lot of near misses from these objects almost hitting these airplanes when they're in flight, these jets, right? The F-16s or whatever. And so now Congress is looking into it, and they're asking these pilots, like, what the heck is the deal? About 10 years ago, the Navy upgraded its radar systems across the board. And once they upgraded the radar, all of a sudden they started seeing all of these objects sprinkled all across the East Coast. All these objects floating around and flying around. The pilots are reporting these objects as oftentimes being clear spherical orbs that are encased around a black cube. So that's interesting. And these objects oftentimes will defy the laws of physics as we know them. They will, descend from 30,000 feet down to ocean level in like 2 seconds. They will zoom around and take these, right angle turns midair, defying G-force as we know it, things like this, right? So as Congress starts to look into these things, we're starting to realize that there's a lot going on under the surface. They are admitting that non-human biologics have been discovered in these UFO crashes, that the aerospace industry has been trying to reverse engineer these UFO crashes over the last 60, 70 years. Just a lot of weird stuff, right? There's a lot of underwater reports of these, they don't have windows on the submarine, so all they see is these radar signatures of an object that's fast approaching the submarine. Oftentimes they think it's like a torpedo or they're under attack, and this mysterious object will zoom towards the submarine and then just sort of hover there for a little bit and then disappear. So a lot of weird stuff going on. Reports from these military people that oftentimes are putting their own, personal reputation on the line by even talking about this stuff. There's this huge stigma within the military community and the government that if you talk about UFOs, you're a weirdo. You're not going to be taken seriously. You're not going to be put on the more important missions. There might be questions about your mental health, and it sort of puts your career in jeopardy. So a lot of times these pilots and these people within the government don't want to talk about it because they don't want to risk, the stigma that comes across when you talk about UFOs and stuff. So anyway, that's what's going on with the UAPs and UFOs. Now let's shift to this stuff that's happening in New Jersey, and really, it's not just happening in New Jersey now; it's sort of spreading. There's reports of these things over New York and Ohio and California and London and Germany and Australia, and so it's a global thing, right? That's the weird thing about this, is it's not just reporting on U.S. shores. It's not just on the East Coast. It's kind of everywhere now. And I find it very interesting that it was sort of this underground thing that unless you follow UFOs, as I do, and follow these accounts on X, as you're wearing a tinfoil hat, you don't really hear about this stuff. But it's slowly leaking its way out into the mainstream media. I just saw the Daily Show talking about it, and all of the major news networks are talking about it, the mainstream networks. But I find it very interesting that they're not referring to them as UAPs. Not one of these places is reporting them as UAPs or UFOs. They're all calling them drones. So what's going on, if you're not following this thing, is there's these swarms of drones that appear after sunset mysteriously. Nobody knows where they're coming from. And then they sit around and hover or fly in the same area for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. There's been reports of these drones that are flying for up to 12 hours. They're flying over neighborhoods, which is concerning for the residents. They're flying over airports, which several airports have shut down because of all this drone activity. There's not just one or two, it's swarms of drones, right? They're hovering over these military bases. They're hovering over these artillery and ammunition bases and depots, which pose a threat to national security for obvious reasons. And the thing that's so weird about these drones is there's been a couple of them reported, right? But most of them are reported as being car-sized or minivan-sized, which is highly unusual, right? Because the military does have a few of these big drones, but as far as these drone experts understand, that the current technology, these drones can only stay in the air for a couple of hours. Cutting edge technology can stay in the air for like 4 hours max. Like those are the cutting edge, best of the best. These drones can stay in the air for up to 4 hours. But these drones that are hovering over New Jersey and New York, they're hovering for 8 hours, 12 hours, which makes no sense with no way of recharging. So that's super weird. Now, again, this isn't the first time that drones have been sighted. Like, this isn't a new thing. Several years ago, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, this has happened before. And it hasn't been as mainstream as it is now. Most people weren't talking about it. But for those in the know, if you know, you know, there have been reports and sightings of these mysterious drones floating over military sites for quite some time. There's lots of evidence, whether or not it's fake or real. Who knows, right? It's so hard these days to know what's real and not real with AI and deep fakes and all that stuff. But several of these objects are being described in a couple of different ways. So I don't think that there's just one thing happening, one thing that we're seeing. Now, I think that definitely all of these reports that are coming in are sort of a mix of things. I think that people are confusing real aircraft, real legit airplanes or helicopters. I think that there are actual drones out there doing things, right? There are drones that do surveillance for various private companies, for gas companies, things of this sort. Then there are the hobbyist drones that are flying around, especially now. I'm sure there are more people that are throwing up their hobby drones just to sort of confuse everybody and fuck around. But these drones are being reported as being car-sized, and some of them are reported as making no noise whatsoever. They're completely silent, which is unusual for drones. And other drones are being reported as making a helicopter or a drone-like sound, right? So a couple of them are fixed wing, like an airplane. So a few of them are fixed wing, and some of them have no wings. So there's several different things zooming around out there. There have been many reports that when a helicopter or a police or military drone goes up to investigate what the hell these things are, they go dark, right? The lights turn off and they disappear. That's the thing about them too, is they have lights on them, right? So if they were trying to be covert, if they were trying to be all secretive, why do they got their lights on? right? And the lights that they have on are lights that are required by the FAA. Those red and green lights that are on airplanes and drones and stuff. So if you have a drone of a certain size, it's required that you have these red and green and white lights on them so that everybody can see what's going on. So if you have a drone that is the size of a car, according to drone experts and military experts, I've been diving deep on this. So according to the people who know what the hell they're talking about, drones of this sort would cost several $100,000 up to perhaps a couple of $1,000,000 in order to have a drone that is capable of staying in the air for up to 12 hours, and that is the size of a car. But the thing that's unusual about this, and like I said, I find it weird that they're calling them drones and not calling them UAPs, is they're not displaying any of the actions that I talked about earlier about the UFOs. They're not making crazy maneuvers. They're not, descending or ascending 30,000 feet in a matter of seconds. They're not doing crazy right turn angles or anything that defies physics. So it's all technology that is conceivable, right? It's conceivable that there's technology that a government has come up with that can allow these drones to stay up for 12 hours. So it's not anything that's like mind-blowing, right? But what is weird about it is that oftentimes when they look up at them with infrared or other scanner systems to see what the hell they are, they have no heat signature, which defies physics as we know it, right? Everything that is flying in the air gives off at least some sort of heat signature. Even the F-16s, I was told by a pilot, like he called me, like we talked last week. I heard on a podcast that an F-16 pilot said that they have ways of masking heat signatures, but it doesn't completely reduce them altogether. They can reduce it, but not completely eliminate heat signatures. So it's weird that they have no heat signatures. What else is weird is that these objects, these quote unquote drones, are not showing up on any of the flight tracker apps. So if you have a drone of a certain size, you are required by the FAA to register it so everybody knows you got it. And all modern drones, especially these big boys that are the size of a car, theoretically, they're all supposed to have these transponders that emit a digital signature letting the towers and the government and the FAA know where the drone is, where it's flying, who it's registered to. All of this information is pinged out and transmitted out of these drones. Now, the weird thing about these mysterious drones over New York and New Jersey is they're not emitting those signatures. They're not pinging out the normal registration information that they're supposed to be transmitting through radio signals or however it transmits out. So maybe one or two people are fucking around, or maybe it's some, deep CIA operation or something, and so they're unregistered. But if they're unregistered, why do they have the FAA lights on? Why do they have the red and green lights on, right? Why not go completely dark and completely black? These things seem to want to be seen by everybody, right? There seems to be confusion being created intentionally. So there's a lot of talk of like, why don't we just take these things down, right? And there's a lot of sources that are saying like, we've tried and we can't. If you were to fly one of your hobby drones over a military base or military installation, it would be shot down immediately, whether with actual ammunition, or there is technology that uses electromagnetic pulses that can quite effectively take these drones down, right? There's technology that exists to take these drones down quite effectively. Now, the thought is that perhaps we're not taking these drones down because if a drone were to fall over civilian neighborhoods or houses or even a freeway or something, that it could fall and kill or hurt people, right? Or perhaps that these drones have something nefarious on them, whether it's, chemical weapons or a nuke or something along those lines, that we don't want to be shooting these things down because it would just cause further damage and chaos, right? So, there's just a lot of weirdness. Now, the mayors of these cities that they're flying over and the governors of these states that they're flying over are demanding answers because they don't know what the hell's going on. They haven't been told. Congressional members have no idea what's going on. The Department of Defense and the Pentagon and Homeland Security, they have said they have no idea what's going on. The FBI is like, we know they're there, but they're not ours, and we don't know what they are. Now, the White House has been regularly saying basically, don't worry about it. The White House, all they're saying is that these drones have shown no hostile intentions, so we're just going to leave them alone, right? We know that they're there. So all they're saying is like, we know they're there and they don't appear dangerous. But what is that based on? What are they basing that knowledge on? What are they basing that information on? So it would appear that they know exactly what's happening and that they're not talking about it. But if this were some sort of collusion behind the government, doing this for fear purposes, etc., which I'm going to go into in a minute, they're not. It's not a very coordinated event, right? There are these journalists that will oftentimes say that they have these contacts within the Pentagon or high-ranking military officials or whatever. And when these sorts of things, these sort of topics come up, oftentimes these high-ranking officials will say, "Look, I do know what's going on. It's highly confidential. It's top secret. I'm not allowed to talk about it, but just trust me. We know what's going on, but I can't tell you any more information." That's not happening. What is happening is they're saying, look, normally we are read into these programs. Normally we do have this top secret confidential information, and we don't. We actually have no idea what's going on. And so there's just sort of this mass confusion amongst the government, amongst the municipalities and the states and the federal government. Nobody seems to know what's going on, and everybody seems to be keeping mum about it. So as far as I can tell, here's the different possibilities as to what the heck these dang drones are. First of all, it might be a foreign adversary, right? It might be the Chinese. The Chinese are well known for having these highly advanced drones. Maybe you've seen them on TikTok or Instagram where they, have these swarms of drones that oftentimes will, get together and synchronize and form a cool looking dragon, something like that, right? One New Jersey congressman said that perhaps these drones are coming from an Iranian mothership off the coast. And perhaps part of the reason why the government is not willing to shoot down these drones is because they know that it's sort of an act of war if they are Chinese or Iranian or Russian or something along those lines. But from a logistical standpoint, I've listened to military people and drone people talk about the idea of a foreign adversary launching these drones from somewhere, right? There's been a lot of reports of these drones coming from the Atlantic Ocean, whatever that means, right? Coming off of the water, out of the water. Nobody knows. Nobody can see them. They are unable to track them at the end of the day when they zoom off. Nobody knows where they go. Nobody knows where they come from. But if you were a foreign adversary, you would have to have some sort of ship off of our coast that was somehow remaining undetected, or perhaps a submarine that's somehow remaining undetected off the eastern coast, highly unlikely, right? And they would have to have some sort of a mothership or some sort of base of operations where you launch all of these things from, right? And not to mention the fact that it would have to travel hundreds of miles off of that ship in order to, get to New Jersey, get to Ohio, get to New York, get to all these other spots, right? So it's highly impractical and highly unlikely that this is some sort of foreign adversary. And if it was, why aren't they attacking, right? And if it was some sort of foreign adversary, why aren't they doing a good job of at least trying to hide, right? They're out in the open, these drones, they have lights. They're not trying to be incognito at all. So that's unusual. There's another rumor going around that they are scanning, these drones are scanning devices. They are scanning for some sort of a nuclear weapon or some sort of dirty bomb or something along those lines, because the technology to scan for that sort of thing would need to be utilized at nighttime. And so they think that perhaps that's what they're doing is it's the government scanning for something. They don't want the public to panic and freak out that there's some sort of a rogue nuke somewhere in New Jersey or New York, and they're scanning for that. Another option that these drones could be, which I lean towards, this one seems probable to me, is that they're using it as some sort of a disruption for the upcoming inauguration. There are elements of the deep state, elements of the intelligence community that have allegedly tried to take out President Trump in various ways. They've used the Department of Justice to, try to indict him and get him in jail, and they've tried to impeach him twice. They tried to impeach him when he wasn't even in office. Like, the deep state is not a big fan of Trump, and that's a whole different topic. But I believe that there are elements of the deep state, the CIA, the intelligence communities, etc., that are not friendly to Trump. And this may be some sort of a way, as a last-ditch effort, to keep him from entering the office in order to declare some sort of a national emergency, and that will sort of suspend the continuity of government, that will keep him out of office, make up this rule and that rule, do anything they can to keep him out. So that's another option that I'm kind of leaning towards as being probable. Also, it could be that they're using these drones in order to justify passing some sort of a bill. In fact, in Congress, they just tried to pass a bill that would sort of restrict the American civilian population's privacy. This Emergency Drone Act that tried to come through, that would allow the government to monitor these drones in a way that they couldn't before. And it would allow, for example, them to monitor if these drones were flying over a public airport, for example. This bill that just got shut down, thank the Lord, this bill that just got shut down, it would have allowed for the federal government to tap into everybody's phones and devices for the sake of drone safety. Got a drone situation, so we're going to tap into everybody's phones in order to make sure that we know where it's coming from, and it's a huge privacy concern. And Rand Paul had big issues with it, so you can check that out on YouTube if you're interested. But the government has a history of doing these sorts of things, that they set up a sort of scenario where they're able to then come in and say, okay, we're going to take care of the problem that we have set up ourselves, and we're going to, for your own good, we're going to restrict your privacy. And it's the same thing as the Patriot Act, right? After 9/11, the Patriot Act was enacted that allegedly was supposed to be to track terrorists, right? But what it did, if you look into it, was allowed them to just monitor everybody, right? It sort of was an open, free pass, a get out of jail free card to just allow them to carte blanche monitor all of our cell phones and internet activity, etc., and sort of erase all privacy as we know it. So there could be some sort of situation happening there where they're hoping to sort of enact some sort of emergency congressional oversight or congressional act that will further restrict our privacy, right? There's another thing that Lou Elizondo, for those of you that know, he's a part of the UFO community. I won't get into it. Personally, just a little side note, I think Lou Elizondo is full of BS, but that's my personal opinion. That's my personal gut feeling, as I think he's a plant from the government. I don't believe anything he says, but he's saying that this might just be a cover-up, that there are actual UAPs and UFOs flying over New Jersey and New York, etc. And in order to muddy the waters, in order to confuse people, in order to distract the populace, the U.S. government, knowing that these are UFOs, knowing that there's a UAPs, and not wanting to freak anybody out, the U.S. government is then putting a bunch of their own drones into the air, saying, "Oh no, there's nothing to see here. These are just weird drones, right? Don't worry about it." Hoping that if anybody believes they are actual UFOs, that it's just sort of the water is so muddy that nobody knows what the hell's going on. Let's sort of segue into another option that is more fun and that I would like to believe, but I'm a little suspicious of. And that is the fake alien invasion, right? There's sort of been whispers in various spiritual communities and UFO communities that the government at some point is going to fake an alien invasion. In fact, in the 1980s, President Reagan said, "Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world." And yet I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our people than war or the threat of war? So I find that very interesting. And for those of you that aren't familiar, there's a little thing called Project Bluebeam. Okay. Project Bluebeam is this conspiracy theory. Let's just call it what it is. It's a conspiracy theory that was proposed by Serge Monast. He was a Canadian journalist in the 1990s. And he suggested it's not based in fact, it's not based on anything. It's just this guy's opinion about what's going to happen. Okay. He believed that the global elites, that the 1%, that the cabal, is going to use some sort of advanced technology in order to stage an alien invasion or some sort of a religious event. Okay, that he believed that there's going to be 4 different things that could possibly be done in order to completely confuse the populace. The first thing he thought might happen was that the deep state, the cabal, would use fake archaeological evidence to sort of discredit in a major way world beliefs around religions. He also believed that they would use some sort of a holographic or technological hologram display of like Jesus or some sort of a religious figure that would appear worldwide, that would sort of think that there's a second coming of Christ, something along those lines. Which makes me think back to the Nephilim that were supposedly seen in Florida. Remember those dark, shadowy Nephilim that appeared in Florida and they looked fake, but everybody thought like they were demons, and then it just sort of was swept under the rug and never talked about again. I always kind of wondered if that's sort of the technology that we're talking about here, this sort of holographic technology meant to scare people, right? So then another aspect of Project Bluebeam that people thought would happen is that they were going to use this advanced technology, this hologram, in conjunction with sort of telepathic technology in order to transmit information into people's minds, which, guys, it sounds crazy, but this technology does actually exist. The CIA has technology that can transmit thoughts and can alter people's thoughts. And so the final stage that he believes that they would use against us is sort of this fake UFO invasion, or the idea that the second coming or the rapture is about to occur. Okay. And so it's this idea that the government is going to use these fake events in order to further their own agendas, right? And it wouldn't be the first time, right? If you've got your tinfoil hat firmly applied to the top of your head, we can talk about 9/11, right? And how the Bush administration lied about all of the things after 9/11 in order to justify invading Afghanistan and Iraq and taking over those countries. There was a think tank that was close to the Bush administration at the time that said that we need another Pearl Harbor level event in order to justify these invasions and in order to unite the populace in the same way that Reagan was talking about, that it would unite us. Remember how united we were all after 9/11? We all felt like one united front. The left and the right sort of disappeared and we were all Americans. We were all together. And in this time of, severe bipartisanship and severe left versus right attitudes in this country, I wonder if the powers that be, whether it's the deep state or the administration or whatever, would be willing to fake some sort of an event like this, like an alien invasion or the rapture or 9/11, in order to bring everybody together, right? So if you're a little leery and suspicious of these conspiracy theories, I just wanted to give you guys a brief history and some examples of in the past what the government has done. It's been revealed after the fact. What the government has actually been willing to do in order to deceive the people, the populace, for its own power and control and financial interests, right? If you're not familiar with the Bay of Pigs invasion, what happened there was for many years in the 50s and the 60s, the US government wanted to overthrow Fidel Castro in Cuba, right? They were communist, and the United States viewed that as a great threat right on our shores. So the CIA and the Department of Defense and the presidential administrations were willing to do anything that it took to get Castro out of power, right? So one of the things that they did, they tried multiple things. So we're not going to dive into all of it, but what they did was they took the CIA trained a bunch of Cuban exiles here in America. They trained them with guns and weaponry, and the idea was to train them up and release them into Cuba with the idea that they would overthrow Fidel Castro. Okay. So the wheels were in motion for this Bay of Pigs invasion to take over Cuba and overthrow Cuba. But then when when Kennedy came into office, he wasn't a big fan of this plan. And so he was like, whoa. What are we doing here, guys? And so they had this whole invasion plan that had a bunch of air support from United States airplanes and missiles and all this stuff. And at the very last minute, Kennedy called it off. He called off the air support that was supposed to basically be the main defense that was going to back up these guys, that was going to help in the success of this operation. And at the last minute, he said, no, we're calling it off. We're not doing it. And so he pulled out a bunch of the airships and the air support and basically fucked over everybody that was invading the island. And all of the Cuban exiles that had been trained by the CIA, they were all captured or killed. It turned into this huge hot mess. The CIA was livid with Kennedy. Because of it, Kennedy ended up firing the head of the CIA, who was Alan Dulles of the airport fame, Dulles Airport. At this time, Kennedy was calling for major downsizing of the CIA and the intelligence community, and the deep state and the CIA were not happy with Kennedy, to say the least, right? Next up is something called Operation Northwoods. After the Bay of Pigs fiasco, Operation Northwoods started coming into play, and this was the CIA and the Department of Defense. They were planning on performing terrorist attacks, fake terrorist attacks. They were planning on blowing up U.S. ships, blowing up their own ships, and then blaming it on the Cubans as a justification for a United States invasion of Cuba, right? They wanted to fake blowing up their own ships, killing U.S. civilians, killing U.S. military, all for the sake of going into Cuba and toppling the Castro regime. So Kennedy said, no, we're not doing that, guys. We're not doing that. Further distancing himself and pissing off the CIA and the deep state. Okay. Next up to bat was the Cuban Missile Crisis, which maybe you guys have heard. And what this was, if you're unfamiliar, was the U.S. had put a bunch of missiles in Turkey, which was close to the Russian border, right? So the U.S. put a bunch of missiles in Turkey, which is a very provocative move. Russia got jumpy and irritable about that for good reason, right? And Russia was like, back off, get those missiles out of Turkey. The United States refused, and so Russia said, "That's fine. That's fine. You're going to put missiles on our border. Well, guess what? We're going to go to our friends in Cuba, and we're going to load up Cuba with a bunch of missiles and see what you guys think about that." So Russia put a bunch of missiles into Cuba, and everybody started panicking and freaking out. And Kennedy was involved in this as well. And Russia started sending more ships towards Cuba with more missiles. The United States set up a blockade and said, no. You're not going to put more missiles in Cuba. It almost started World War III. The tensions were very high. If you look into it, it's a really interesting story. I won't get into it too much here, but it got super intense. It literally almost started World War III. At the last minute, Kennedy was talking to Russia, got everybody to back down. Cooler heads prevailed. Everything sort of de-escalated. Russia agreed to take the missiles out of Cuba. Once everything was all kosher, America sort of quietly said, okay, fine, we'll take our missiles out of Turkey as well, but you guys got to do it first. And so this is just further, further tensions arising. Then what happened was the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The Gulf of Tonkin incident is where the U.S. lied and faked a naval ship getting attacked by the North Vietnamese. This was in the 60s. The North Vietnamese were the communist regime, the communists within Vietnam. So the United States said, oh, we got shot by the communists in North Vietnam, which is then justification for them to go into Vietnam, right, and start kicking ass there, which it turns out we didn't really kick ass because we ended up losing that war. But It's this idea that the United States is willing to do anything to justify doing whatever their agenda happens to be, right? The US government has a very long history, just so you guys know, of going into countries and toppling their government and sort of putting in a guy that's friendly to our agenda and putting that guy in charge, right? After World War II, everybody who joined the UN sort of made a pact, all the countries made a deal that said, like, okay, look, we're not going to invade any more countries. That's going to be against the rules. We all promise not to invade countries and take over those territories. So in order to skirt around those UN rules, what the United States has a habit of doing now is like, okay, fine, we're not going to go and invade your country, but what we're going to do is we're going to topple your government and we're going to install a guy that's friendly to us. And we're going to go in and rape your country for all of its natural resources. So technically, we don't take over the country, but like wink, wink, we kind of do, right? We install military bases in these countries. We make sure that they're friendly to us and our agendas. We did it in Panama in the 80s. We toppled General Noriega. Bush did it, like I said, with Iraq and Afghanistan after 9/11. We did it in Libya with Muammar Gaddafi and toppling his regime. Most recently, Syria is in the news with Assad, and we were definitely behind that. We are definitely responsible for all of the shenanigans and nonsense that are happening in Ukraine right now. I don't know if you guys know much about Ukraine. Just a little side note, because it's a deep topic and it's a complicated topic, and I'm not going to get into it fully here. But just the broad brushstrokes are the United States went into Ukraine and basically, like I said, we toppled their government because the previous leader of Ukraine was pro-Russia, and we can't have that, right? We can't have these pro-Russia guys running countries that we want to have on our side. So the Ukrainian president was a little too cozy with Russia, and we didn't like that because the United States is trying to have complete global domination. So what we did is we went in, and the CIA and various elements of our government and deep state went in and dismantled that government, that administration, and we put in Zelensky, right? We put in Zelensky because he would basically do whatever we told him to. He was our little puppet. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Zelensky is an actor. Furthermore, he was an actor on a Ukrainian TV show where he played the president. Like, it doesn't get any wackier than that. Like, he actually was a guy that played the president on a TV show, and then the US came in and said, hey, let's just use that guy to be the real president. Like, that sort of makes sense. That's an easy switcheroo. So what happened was we put our puppet guy in, Zelensky, and said, okay, you're going to do whatever we tell you to. We're going to pump in billions of dollars into your country, and you just shut the hell up and do whatever we tell you. Now, what NATO is, the whole purpose of NATO is basically an anti-Russian military coalition, okay? They're very against Russia, and that's essentially their entire purpose. So what happened was Putin said, look, I promise to stay out of Ukraine if you guys, NATO, led by America, essentially led by America, we're the big dog in town, right? If you guys stay out of Ukraine and keep your NATO missiles and troops out of Ukraine, because it's right on my border, I don't need you guys saddled right up to me. Putin wants to have a little buffer zone, and Ukraine was that buffer zone between Europe, the EU, NATO, and Russia. So Ukraine was this buffer zone that was safe, that was like, look, you guys do your thing over there. I'm going to do my thing over there. Let's just leave Ukraine out of this. And NATO and the United States said, okay, fine, we'll stay out of Ukraine. And then we turned around and did just the opposite. This was spearheaded and led by the Biden administration. Biden and Kamala Harris specifically went in and did some trade deals behind closed doors and said, like, look, we're gonna bring all these NATO troops, and we're gonna bring all these NATO weaponry and tanks and missiles and all this stuff. We're gonna bring it right into Ukraine, even though we said we're not going to. And Putin said, that's fine. If you do that, you're going to start a war, and I'm going to kick your guys' ass. So please don't do that. And the Biden administration and NATO and the EU and everybody involved said, nah, we're going into Ukraine. It's the same exact situation as the Russians going into Cuba with missiles right on our border. Think about this. How would America react if China or Russia or one of our adversaries, Iran, got a bunch of missiles, got a bunch of troops, and went into Mexico, right along the Rio Grande, right along the Texas border, and set up shop with a bunch of missiles and tanks and troops, and just said, "Hi, how you guys doing?" That's exactly what's going on here. Is we sent in a bunch of troops, and Russia said, "I don't like that. I told you guys not to do that, and now I have to invade, you sons of bitches." So that's what's going on. That's essentially what's going on in Ukraine. But the broader point here is that the United States has a longstanding policy of lying and deceiving the populace for their own nefarious actions, right? For their own power and control. So as much as I would like to believe that these drones, quote unquote drones, are aliens or something cool and fun like that this is actually disclosure unfolding, or we're finally going to get to meet the aliens, I don't think that's what's going on. Unfortunately, I don't think that's what's going on. I think it's just the government up to its old shenanigans, up to its own nonsense. It's regular business as usual, keeping a tight lip about it. Oh, we can't talk about this for reasons of national security. Sorry, can't talk about it. And then it will just sort of quietly disappear. They'll pass a couple of acts in Congress that'll expand their power and authority and diminish the privacy of the United States populace. So, it's a bit of a bummer, but that's what I think is going on. I don't think it's adversarial. I don't think it's an Iranian mothership. I don't think it's Chinese or Russian. I just think it's the deep state up to this business as usual. So I'm a little bit let down by that, but we'll see what happens. I'm kind of curious to see how things unfold, especially as the inauguration comes up here and as this is starting to get more press. I don't believe mainstream media, and I'm highly skeptical of anything they say. And so when they call them drones, when they say that the White House tells us everything's okay, I sort of tend to believe the opposite. So as much as I'm looking for disclosure and UFOs, I think that it's less exciting than that. So, this Christmas, if you hear something, coming down your chimney, it's either Santa or an interdimensional being or just like a Chinese drone. So happy holidays.